Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. I'm your host Ben Wevel, and today we have a very special guest. Instead of the normal news, phenomenal Formula One journalist and creator of the Five Red Lights podcast, Aaron Harper, joins us. Aaron, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Glad to be here.
Great. So let's start at the very beginning. The early episodes of your thrilling F1 podcasts, Five Red Lights, began with commentator extraordinaire Murray Walker's infamous "And it's go, go, go." What significance did he have in your decision to join Formula One, or the world of Formula One?
Well, when I first started watching Formula One, he was the commentator, and he was the no, not in a bad way, the know-it-all of F1. He was able to convey what was happening to a young boy in a way that was processable and engaging and enjoyable. And when you're a young child, you try to emulate people who are significant to you. So like children playing in the street try to nowadays be Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo or Kylian Mbappe. So for a young boy growing up watching Formula One, I was Murray Walker. So I would play and I would commentate as Murray, and I would use the words that he said. So he had quite a significant bearing on my childhood. And then when I had the concept of the podcast, he would always count up the lights, and it just always resonated with me. So I thought it'd be a good name of a podcast, and it seemed appropriate to use his voice and his words in the intro, which became even more significant when he passed away last year. So he was really important in my journey into F1, and I would say I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of people grew up in the 90s associated with Murray as Formula One became more and more sort of apparent on the TV, and he was the man for it.
Yeah. So Murray Walker was an infamous commentator, but what was it that inspired you to take that commentating and become a journalist out of that? So has journalism as well, alongside the influence that Murray Walker's had, has that always been an ambition of yours?
Yes. When I was at school, I took the GCSEs to do journalism, and then I moved on to the A-levels, where I struggled a little bit. The English A-level wasn't quite what I'd expected it to be, so I struggled with it. So I moved into coaching, so because I love sport. So I currently coach football, but I'm returning to my ambition to be a journalist, and I'm achieving it at the moment. So I'm now writing for F1 Chronicle. I do my own things. So the world of media has really opened up, even through my own sort of 20s. Yeah. So the growth of Twitter and online blogs and digital-only media publications such as The Race, they're pretty groundbreaking, and they're still, I would say, in their infancy in that way, because there's so much potential within them, and they can be so many different things. Gone are the days of journalism where it was just print and it was Autosport magazine or a newspaper tabloid that you'd pick up down at the shop. It's on your phone, it's the radio, it's the TV, it's everything. It's what we're doing right now as well. Podcasting is one of those things that fits in really well, especially with my lifestyle. And I spend a lot of time driving, so it's good to listen to a podcast such as this, and it gets me through my journeys, which is really good. And I get to listen to something that I enjoy.
Yeah, and podcasts really started to take off, as you're saying. In the wake of the lockdown, people were spending a lot more time on their phones, taking in media in a kind of different way. And I know that you started your own podcast, or you uploaded your first videos onto YouTube about Formula One around the advent of the 2020 season. So was lockdown part of the driving force behind starting it? Was it just something to do whilst there was nothing else to do?
It was convenient because it allowed me time to look at what I was going to do properly, although it didn't give me a chance to actually experiment with a lot of things for quite a while. I'd actually had the concept for the Five Red Lights towards the end of the 2019 season. So the basis was to take 5 talking points from a Grand Prix weekend and then talk about them. But it's kind of morphed into something more than that, which is good. And then the lockdown itself, I saw a lot of people pop up with their own podcasts, and that's great because it was allowing people to express themselves in a different way, and they find avenues that they maybe never thought they would take. And it's seen some people really make a jump in their careers. We've seen a lot of new faces within the paddock who have only really come to light in the last 2 years, but they've been able to spend that time. And I say a lot of things in life are down to timing. You need a little bit of good luck. Obviously, a world pandemic is not good fortune, but if you can turn a negative into a positive, then that's always a win in your book, because you're doing something that takes that negative energy, and something that Lewis Hamilton says a lot. He's going to take negative energy, turn it into positive, and bounce back from a weekend. So there's no greater adversity than, a world pandemic or such other things that are happening in the world at the moment. If you can turn a negative into a positive, then it naturally turns into an opportunity for you to create something better for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really great attitude, really admirable. And you were talking a bit earlier about kind of being able to express yourself in different ways due to the pandemic. And I've noticed that kind of one of your best performing innovations is the flying lap concept, which you use on your YouTube channel. I think your most viewed YouTube video at the moment is your review of day 2 of Bahrain testing. And so how have these creative ideas helped to grow your prominence as a Formula One podcaster?
So that video you're talking about is the is the video where Kevin Magnussen topped testing. So I think I hit the jackpot in the way I tagged that video, the way I titled that video. So the SEO for it was pretty strong, and everyone was just searching Kevin Magnussen, and within about 3 hours of putting it up, it had over 300 views. So what I'd wanted to do for a little while was I took inspiration from a fellow creator, The Outside Line. He did something called the Hot Lap.
And you did a collaboration with him recently as well.
I did, yes, about the F1 sprints. So he had the Hot Lap idea where he'd do a topic and discuss it in about 6 minutes. So you do your out lap, your flying lap, and your in lap. But I wanted to take it a step further and really make it a challenge, so that it was something that people could catch up with very quickly, and there was a certain amount of challenge to it for me, which made it fun. It wasn't just, oh, here are the headlines and I've got to do it. There's a little bit of a race in there for me, so I have to give you all the headlines and try and do it within the time of the pole position. So if pole position is a 1 minute 30, I have 90 seconds to tell you what happened across the race. But when we head to Austria at the Red Bull Ring, I'm going to have about 65 seconds to tell you. So if I start speed talking, then that would be why. But then when there's a slightly longer circuit, take Spa-Francorchamps, it's a longer lap. It's nearly 2 minutes. So I can maybe have more sort of subheadings, and then you can cover the race a little bit more in depth. So it just offers up a bit more of a journalistic challenge. You have to pick and choose which headlines you go with. Basically rank what's most important, what do people need to know, and what do they need to go and search a little bit more themselves.
Yeah, that's great. And just bringing it on to kind of your other forays in journalism, so you work for the F1 Chronicle. How did you gravitate towards them initially? Was the flying lap and these kind of innovations part of what they saw in you, or were you putting yourself in the position to be hired by them?
So they found me through my work last year. So I joined as a panelist for their podcast, Formula One Grid Talk. So I've been doing that. I had a bit of a dodgy start because I went on the Spa race preview and the Spa qualifying, and then the race was a non-event. So it was a bit worrying when I went on a preview that the race would get cancelled the next weekend. Luckily, it didn't. So I've been working with them for 6 months or so, and then I'd completed my journalism course, a few weeks ago, and I got in touch with the owner of F1 Chronicle, who sort of heads things up, and just said, look, I would like some writing experience. Have you got any opportunities? And he was like, yeah, great. So we now do race reports because some of the journalists are based in different time zones. So being in the European time zone puts me most of the time, except in Miami, in the right time zone to write a race report fairly quickly. So with a journalistic publication, you want to get the news out there quickly, and you need to be accurate, and then you can sort of update it as you go. So that was my pitch to them, and they basically said, yeah, great, come aboard. So they knew me already. They knew my work. They knew me from their own podcast. So it was I wouldn't say a match made in heaven, but it was the right place, right time.
Yeah. And part of your kind of work with F1 Chronicle, as you were saying, was these kind of race reviews and analysis of the races. And I can kind of see the sort of mirror between your Formula One podcast, whose in my opinion, greatest innovation is the Flying Lap, which attempts to summarize and analyze the race, and also your work as a journalist in writing, where you also analyze and review the race. So how do you think your podcast work has aided your journalism?
So with a podcast, excuse me. So with a podcast, like you'll know yourself, you have to do your research, you have to plan it. I write a full-on script and then work from there. So I've got full paragraphs that I can look at, and if it's the easy way out is to just simply read it. So I've written it in a way that I can read it, and then I can sort of almost try and pass that off as not reading it. But then you can sort of fly away from that if you need to. So if you see something that needs adding, you can just add it in. You can just work from there. So it allows you that preparation time. And in a sport such as Formula One, where you need to be quick to cover everything, then putting that into writing it's just writing up the script for your podcast is good practice. And then for a written piece, you end up diving more into the nitty gritty of things, and you can put a bit more detail in it. A little bit like with a podcast, depending on what you're talking about. So like with a race review, I might just sort of give you an overview of what happened to a certain driver's race, or opinion on an accident or an event. With writing, you tend not to give opinions unless it's a specifically opinion piece. So you keep it to the facts, and then you just sort of inform from there. So you give your what happened, who it happened to, and then you maybe give their version of events, and you maybe discuss it a little bit, but you keep it very sort of hands off. You don't get into it too much. With a podcast, you can start throwing your own opinions out there, and you can love or hate Hamilton or Verstappen as much as you please, and then bear the consequences. But within a writing perspective, you have to be as down the middle as possible. Obviously, if someone has made a horrendous error and completely wiped someone out, take Bottas at the Hungarian Grand Prix last year, there was no way of writing that in a way that it wasn't Bottas's fault. You just have to write it for what it is. Bottas made a mistake, took out both Red Bulls. So in that sense, you have to report it as it is. But if you think it's 50-50, like maybe the Hamilton and Verstappen collision at Monza, you just put they collided. You can't say, oh, well, this person did that and this driver then responded in this way, and this is why. You can't go too far in that way.
Yeah, you were talking about these big incidents. So as someone who's watched Formula One for such a long time and has experienced so many moments of drama, do these moments of heightened tension still give you the pleasure as if you're watching it for the very first time, or the very first race you're watching?
Well, the very first race I watched was the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix.
Oh no!
So
there's a massive pile up at the.
Yeah, so for absolute carnage, you can't really set the bar much higher. But there have been races and there have been incidents where, for various reasons, good and bad,